One of the things in recovery is that people come with a lot of guilt and a lot of baggage. I've mentioned this several times. And many of them have the belief, because of what they've done in the throes of their problem, that they're bad people who are trying to turn good. Now, a lot of this stuff is bad, and a lot of people, I'm certain, have reminded you how bad it is. But is it a case of maliciousness? I don't think so. The best thing is to not look at yourself as a bad person going good, but look at yourself as a person who's been sick, who is getting healthier. That's the right attitude to take. Granted, you did a lot of bad stuff, a lot of it is shameful and embarrassing, and you may carry a little tinge of guilt for some of it for the rest of your life. But what fueled it? What fueled it is your disease. So come to see yourself as a sick person getting better. To see recovery not as a moral issue, but as a health issue. And health on several levels, not just your physical, mental, and emotional health, but your social health as well. Because in recovery, you can become the person you should be. And I've often said this in my other heathen lectures, that one thing that we are offered is the opportunity to turn our lives around and to say, all right, I was bad in the past, now I can do well. Now that applies to heathenism and paganism in general, but it also applies to recovery, that the wrongs of the past do not have to define us for the rest of our lives. You rule what's in your own head, so put it in your own head. Sick person getting better, don't let the past rule your future. The principle is not bound by precedent. Your ability to succeed and enjoy and lead a really good life is not limited by the things you may have done, the so-called misdeeds of the past. And even misdeed isn't a good word because it has a moral tone. Again, we're not speaking a moral issue. But you'd be surprised how for many people recovery is a moral issue, especially those who go for the whole Judeo-Christian trappings of conventional recovery groups. It can be pretty funny. They'll speak of guilt. They speak at a third step and think they got to turn it over and pray and Jesus is going to step down. And you can just sit there and be amused by that because really moral isn't the issue at first. This is not to say we become amoral or immoral. And there's a cautionary tale about that. I was sober a few years. I was at a meeting one night, and the man who was the speaker came up and talked with us. You know, he was hanging with some of my friends and seemed a nice enough guy, and he spoke and gave me a message that, wow, you know, a lot of people, they get clean. They get sober, and they think now they're on the side of the gods, on the side of all that is good and holy, and no matter what they do is all right because they're on the side of the gods. And that includes petty little crimes and a little wrongdoing on the side. And this guy figured, well, I'm sober, I'm doing good, I can get away with it. He got caught. Ended up doing a year and a half in jail. And when he got to jail and tried to fit into the AA group there, one of the inmates came up and said, you know something, we're here because alcohol is what put us here. You were off the drugs, you knew better, and without alcohol you end up here. So we all think you're a big dummy. See, the rules don't change just because now you're in recovery. You still have to obey the law. You still can't get away with it. There is no excuse. So in that case, there is a moral issue of right and wrong. Not the religion, keep it in your pants right and wrong, but the fact of right and wrong we all know. That if you steal, if you harm someone, if you cheat, if you break the law, there can very well be consequences for it. So don't let your recovery be a thing of, I can get away with it, because believe me, you can't. And eventually it will catch up to you one way or another. It's always good to run a tight ship, especially in early recovery, to not indulge in any of the little pet pleasures until you've really got yourself solid and grounded. You know, no breaking the rules. at least for 6 months. Give yourself time to build the foundation of recovery. You often hear the old timers used to say no relationships for the first year. Then it was new relationships for the next 6 months. Then, I don't know, a lot of people seem to be falling in love in the rooms, and they haven't even spent enough time to get to know themselves. So if you're in a relationship already when you come into recovery, it's for your recovery. You've also got to repair that relationship. But if you're not in one, if you're not romantically involved, give yourself time to get your head out of your ass. Don't try. Two things happen. Number one, you keep your head clear and focused on recovery. And number two, you don't inflict your sick, silly, twisted nonsense on some poor innocent person. Because most folks in early recovery are still as toxic as the PJP landfill. And if you want to know how toxic that is, look it up on the internet. Quite a place out there. You want to make sure that if you love someone, you want to give that person your best. You want to be the best person. And that first year, forget 6 months, at least a year. That first year, believe me, you're still toxic. One of the kids I helped along, he was a young man, and he was starting to feel his oats after a few months. And this woman comes to a meeting. She was about his age, and to him, she looked pretty good. He's going, wow, she looks good. And then she had said to someone she only had 40 days recovery. And he said, well, I'm going to ignore that. She really looks good, though. So I gave him this piece of advice. I says, it was one of those round robin where the discussion goes around the room and everyone adds their 2 cents. I says to him, when it gets to her, when you listen to her, close your eyes. So it gets to her, he closes his eyes, actually listens, and he says, oh man, she's really sick. I says, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. You finally came to that conclusion? Getting well takes time. And while there's some things we can hasten through working the steps, making meetings, working on ourselves, some things we can hasten. Some have to come of their own time. A blade of grass will grow a day's growth in a day, and part of our recovery takes time. The things like healing nerves. You hear people about 9 months in recovery, they get a little buggy and stuff. Well, that's just the nerves healing. The physical healing is at that point. Just like some people in early recovery have trouble reading a thing and then speaking it out loud at the same time. And that's because the nerves between the optic nerve and the mouth haven't totally reset yet. It takes time. So give yourself time. Realize that that first year is almost like a grace period. You are going to make mistakes, but it's a time for you to get your foundation. And if you work the steps, especially work on yourself, get that poison out of your life, get that toxicity out of you. And then when you do look for romantic relationships, when you do look for new situations, instead of bringing a sick puppy who's about as poisonous as a what do you call it, one of those cobras or a pit viper, instead of that, you're giving them a good, healthy human being who's headed in the right path. And what would you rather give someone? Chances are, in your addiction or whatever your problem is, alcoholism or whatever, you've inflicted yourself on others, and they got the poisonous you and were the worse for it. You went through their lives like a tornado. Now's the time to stop that pattern by working on yourself and working to assure that when you do get involved with people in the future, instead of a tornado, you're a blessing. That's about all I have for the moment. These are just some ideas, things that have come up over the years, things for you to consider. Remember, I'm clean and sober 30 years. I've seen a lot. I've done very well with this. And any advice I give is based on my experience and observation. And these have been some of my observations, and I hope they help you. I wish you a successful recovery. This is Uncle Thor signing out.